Welcome to the Glazov gang. Tonight, Reform Judaism and why it's bad. Our guest this evening, Aaron Shuster, a writer, producer, director, and a scholar of Middle Eastern politics. Back by popular demand, Barak Lurie, a real estate attorney and the host of the Barak Lurie Show. And last but not least, the one and only Ari David, host of the Ari David Show podcast, and the crowd goes wild. Ari, I get like 200-300 emails about you every week demanding that you return. Very wise and charming guest.
Well, I'm glad you're listening to them.
Okay, fantastic. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Glazov gang.
Thanks for having us.
So fascinating last week that we decided to do part 2. How come I feel that I'm the only one excited about this?
No, we're all excited.
All excited about it?
Excited.
Okay,
Yeah.
So before we begin, on a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you this week to be on the Glazov gang?
Last week I was an 11, this week a 12.
A 12, okay.
This week, definitely a 12 or even 13.
Okay.
The number on the scale is rather arbitrary, but I'm more excited this week than last week, which would mean I'm more excited.
Okay.
Very excited.
Okay.
Excited.
All right then.
Like a wolf seeing a lamb chop.
All right.
All right. Thank you for joining us this week, and we'll be back. Okay, Ari David, you put this idea in my head last week as an extension from last week. We discussed the psychology of left-wing Jews, and of course it got interwoven with Reform Judaism. And you said, Jamie, Reform Judaism, let's do it, why it's a bad thing. Ari David, before we begin with why it's a bad thing, what is it?
Reform Judaism is essentially Judaism without God. It's almost make up your own rules Judaism, in which you can get away with anything as long as you occasionally show up at a synagogue, generally a Reform synagogue. But a lot of the Reform synagogues I've experienced in the Los Angeles area are rooted in social justice or peace activism or other hippy-dippy left-wing ideologies that are completely divorced from the principles of the Ten Commandments or the Torah.
Now, just wait. What would the Reform Jewish person say to you who disagrees with you? He would say, no, wait a minute, Reform Judaism is good because?
Because I feel it's good, and my feelings are hurt that you said that about my synagogue, and feelings are much more, see, I feel, you know, and people like you, Ari, who think, you're just intruding on my feelings.
Okay, so is there maybe a less scathing caricature? What would an intelligent Reform Jew say?
Well, I want to echo,
okay,
and I will address that.
Yeah.
My metaphor that I would use for Reform Judaism, with respect, it's a bit like somebody going into the cockpit of an airplane and merely by being there saying that he's a pilot. Right? No, you're not a pilot, sir, unless you know the mechanics of the plane and you know the concept of lift and everything, and you know some engineering as well. That's what makes you a pilot. And so just merely being there is not enough. That's the problem. So now a Reform a Jew would say, and I belong actually, not by my desire necessarily, to a Reform synagogue. And I can tell you what these people will say.
Oh wait, you go to a Reform synagogue?
I do. I belong.
But you're not a Reform Jew?
Not at all, no.
But you go to a Reform synagogue?
It's, that's one of the compromises of marriage, my friend.
Okay.
So, and I deeply love my wife, and this is what I do. And this synagogue, what they would tell you is that, what are you talking about? We're Jews, we're culturally Jewish, and that's what matters. See, they will define what a Jew is for you, and then they fit within that definition, and therefore you're too far if you are an observant Jew of any kind. That's what their answer is.
Okay, Aaron?
What is the question, Jamie?
What would a Reform Jew say?
Just as an introduction, what does Reform Judaism mean to you? What is it?
Well, Reform Judaism was kind of a a response to a lot of anti-Semitism at the time when it was formed, mainly in Germany in the early 1850s. And I think it was a response to Jews who had now tasted the fruits of the Enlightenment. They basically were set free by Napoleon and were able to enter society under Napoleon's Emancipation Act. And the ghetto walls basically fell open, and Jews were now able, under the law, to enter into normal society and interact with their neighbors. And, but when Napoleon was brought down, some of those countries started to claw back the Enlightenment, the Emancipation Act, and Jews again felt hostility from their neighbors. And Reform Judaism was an attempt to make Jews fit in more easily with their Gentile neighbors and to basically water down certain elements of Judaism that set them apart.
Okay, just a second. But that means that Reform Judaism is ultimately a camouflaging of Jewishness.
It may have started out that way,
But if that's
it's
the
become, that's where it may have started.
But if those are the roots, what does it say about the whole movement? If the very root itself is to say, I'm not a Jew.
Well, I don't know. Well, that's the problem. As it's evolved over time, it's taken in more, like Ari was saying, more progressive leftist values have become really the religion of the Reform movement and not Judaism. Torah, Mishnah, Talmud, who needs that stuff when you have Karl Marx?
Oh,
Yeah.
not only that, but you get to the point where the rabbis, the Reform rabbis, are telling their children and otherwise that we Jews are not even the chosen people, which is one of the highest definitions of the Jews, is that we are the chosen people. And then they otherwise spout off ideas that are completely antithetical to Judaism, whether that's in the abortion realm, the gun control realm, the way we deal with our enemies. That is what ends up happening, and that at some point you realize that the Reform Jews have moved so far apart from the Orthodox or conservative Jews that they are, in essence, a very different religion altogether.
Well, could there be a metaphor, an analogy that it could be like kind of Christians trying to become really modern and hip and, you know, saying that Christianity has nothing to do with the New Testament or Jesus? Hypothetically, is there a little bit of an... Here, look, let me crystallize it this way. Ari, what is Jewish about Reformed Jews?
Absolutely nothing. And in fact, I would make the argument, and let's explore what you just said about Christians in a moment. I would make the argument that the Jew who has no involvement in synagogue life, says no prayers, does not observe the Sabbath, is only Jewish by genetic heritage, essentially ethnically Jewish, is much more Jewish than the Reformed Jew. Because although there's plenty of Christian activity that seems non-traditional, whether it's having rock music playing in the synagogue or different things that are sort of cooler and hipper, it doesn't completely divorce itself from the values of Christianity to the point where it still calls itself Christianity, which is kind of making a statement to the world that, for the Christian, that I'm involved in certain things and identifying with the traditions thereof. With Reformed Judaism, it's so antithetical to not just Orthodox, Hasidic, and conservative Judaism, it's antithetical to the ethnic history of Judaism. The ethnic history of just being Jewish meant something. You know, the deli, the matzo ball soup, that is contradicted by Reformed Judaism.
Yeah. I think that's exactly right. And the concern I have from Reform Judaism is that it's so distanced from the conservative or the Orthodox. And the danger, as Ari just alluded to, is that sometimes it's better if you don't know something, if you don't want to participate in Jewish culture, fine, don't participate, but don't do something else that allows you to do the minimal possible and then still claim yourself to be an observant Jew, or that you claim to know what Judaism is. You don't. It's perfectly fine to say, look, as Ari just said, I was born Jewish, I like the culture of Judaism, but you know what, I don't know enough about Judaism. That's okay, I respect that. But when you actually say that I'm going to take this completely different thing, completely different ideology, which is actually antithetical, and then claim that to be Judaism, then we have a problem.
Probably one of the most radical things that the Reformed movement did at its inception was that they basically, up until the time that the Reform movement came about, Judaism was interconnected with the people. And the Reform movement came along and they said, no, Judaism is a religion like any other religion. You can choose to be Jewish, whether you want to practice Jewish or be something else. And so they split off the people from the religion. And so that's why they became much more open to intermarriage. The rabbis will perform intermarriage rituals, etc. It doesn't matter. We're all the same. It doesn't matter. You're a Jew. You're not a Jew. To them, they basically smashed that value that had been a great part of Jewish tradition since its inception, that Jews basically had to marry within their own faith and keep the people alive.
Gentlemen, each of you are Jewish, just very briefly. Is it inaccurate to say that you're a Reformed Jew?
Inaccurate? I am not a Reformed Jew, yes.
Do you have a label?
Yes, I'm a conservative Jew.
Conservative Jew?
I consider myself a conservative Jew.
I'm a wandering Jew.
A wandering Jew.
Because I find I'm not at home basically in any synagogue. But I've found myself now most comfortable in the Orthodox. Not that I am Orthodox, but I find that the conservative movement has even gone further left recently, so I'm uncomfortable there too.
You're too conservative for conservative Jews?
Yeah, well, in America.
Like politically or religiously?
Both.
Both? Okay.
And we should note
Well,
really
it's like
quickly,
Rabbi Wolpe is going to be performing homosexual marriage now at a conservative synagogue. So
which is
that's
against the
like-
Torah, which is against the Torah.
I'm no longer a conservative Jew.
And remember, just
Although
because
he is.
conservative
He's
Judaism
with
is
it.
not necessarily
He's
politically conservative
Okay.
in the American conservative definition of politically conservative. There are
Okay.
plenty of liberals who are members of conservative synagogues.
Okay. Before I move on, Aaron, you were giggling about something?
No, I just, when Rabbi Wolpe announced that, I wrote him a scathing
Oh, okay.
email, and I said to him, I'm glad to know that you know more than God.
Right, because if a synagogue is performing gay marriage, how could that be if the Torah is against that?
Right. Well, I said to him,
It's not Jewish.
I'm
right?
glad that
It's
you
not Jewish.
consider God's laws just opinions.
Okay, so therefore we move on to this. Please, a little bit brief, because I want to get through some questions. Is Reform Judaism disobedience to God? Ari.
Absolutely, more importantly. The Rabbi Wolpe example is so good because that's an example of disobedience to God and disobedience to Torah scripture. But I would make a further argument, which is it's disobedience, I believe, to the third commandment of the Ten Commandments, which is don't take thy Lord's name in vain in the English shorthand, which essentially means do not preach the Lord's laws or do not preach laws that are not the Lord's laws as if they are the Lord's laws. Essentially, Reform Judaism as a movement is in complete violation of a commandment that when violated makes God look bad to everyone. And that's a profound sin.
I'll disagree. I think that Reformed Jews are Jews in every sense. I think that they've been led down the wrong path.
Is the path disobedience to God?
No, I don't think it's disobedience to God. Again, I just think that they're misinformed.
But just
They've been told.
But wait, a rabbi marrying a gay couple, according to Judaism, is wrong.
Correct.
So if he's doing it, if someone's doing it, it's considered disobedient.
Yeah, I consider that an anecdotal
Okay,
situation.
okay.
But because you asked, generally
Okay,
speaking,
okay,
about
okay.
Reform Judaism, and yes, I would think that performing gay marriage is disobedience to God. But you
Okay.
asked about being a Reformed Jew altogether.
Okay.
And I don't think that. I think that so many of our good Reformed Jewish friends are very much considering themselves to be obedient to God and loving God in every way. It's just that they haven't received the tools to appreciate God in the true Jewish way, which is the Orthodox way, which is it's Talmudically, and from a Torah perspective, it's completely different than what Reform Judaism tries to teach.
What is Reform Judaism teaching?
It teaches that what we need to do is fight against global warming. It means that we should embrace abortion rights.
So social justice, according to what
Yes.
humans think social justice
Exactly
is.
right. That is what is more important. Recycling and everything else like this, and whether or not women wear kippah and so on. It turns things on its head to some
But I
extent.
would, I guess the argument could be made that in itself is disobedience. I sense in your argument somewhere you're saying that the heart yearns for something good in the movement, but they're not applying it.
I think that's right.
But an argument could be made that without application there's disobedience. But okay, Aaron?
Well, I've come to see the reform movement as kind of an arm of the Democratic Party. I mean, whatever the issues are in the Democratic Party, that's what the reform movement trumpets. And where's the division? Where do the Jewish values, so-called, come into play? What sets them apart? What is their point of view that distinguishes them as a Jewish point of view? If you're going to embrace abortion, if you're going to embrace gay rights, if you're going to embrace Marxist social justice concepts of redistribution of wealth, those things do not exist in the Torah or Mishnah or Talmud. That you take one person's wealth that they made and give it to someone who didn't earn it. So that's, to me, what the reform movement has become in modern day America. Is it's just a wing of the Democratic Party, and they basically get their parishioners to go out and vote for the party.
See, my beef would be more with the Reform rabbis than it would be with the actual congregation. I just simply,
That was the word.
the congregation is actually being misled in a sense that they don't realize that they're going the wrong way. They think they're being dutiful and obedient, to use your word, and this is a synagogue after all, and therefore they're doing what is Jewish. But they should be perhaps more informed. They should try to inform themselves about whether or not this is actually consistent with Judaism.
Does it make sense that a rabbi should have an expertise in and command of the Torah and of Jewish teachings in the text?
Sure,
But
absolutely.
but this is lacking in Reform rabbis, correct? Yeah.
I think so.
Okay.
They would say otherwise.
I want to get to the next, but Ari, there was a disagreement with you earlier.
Yeah,
Do
and
you
I
wanna say
have a
anything?
disagreement with Barak on this particular thing, which is I do have a problem with the congregants in this way. The rabbi does lead them through prayers. They do say the Shema, they do say the V'ahavta or other prayers. They should at least be able to read what those prayers mean when translated and see the inconsistencies between the social justice movement and what those prayers preach. Starting with the 10 Commandments, where there are 10 simple statements in complete sentence form, which basically tell you a roadmap of, say, an ideological through line, that if the rabbi then preaches something that is completely inconsistent with those 10 sentences, they should be able to go, aha, this isn't making too much sense for me.
I'm
Use
with you on
their
that.
skepticism.
Yeah, I agree with that.
You want to take a side on that, Aaron?
Not informed enough about
Okay.
Reformed congregants.
Gentlemen, what I find very interesting in terms of, and I'm going to talk about Reform Judaism in this context, but in general in the left, there's so much for intellectual, there's so much for diversity, but among the left, in the left, there's not too much room for intellectual diversity. So the Reform Judaism, from what I've seen, these are the really cool, hip people, and they're for diversity and understanding, but somehow conservative Judaism is not accepted by them. There is no room for, there's no political, let's put it this way, there's no political pluralism within Reform Judaism, in the sense that they pretend that they're very open-minded, but the views expressed by you three gentlemen might not really be too accepted by them, and they might not want you around. Is there a double standard there that on the one hand they're very hip, and yet they are not really that tolerant in terms of the views of conservative Jews?
Yeah, for sure. I think you hit it on the head. It's one thing to embrace tolerance and openness and such, but we see the exact same parallel in the political world with liberals, generally speaking. Despite the definition of liberal being open, they're in fact very intolerant, right? And likewise, you see that somewhat in the reform movement, that they're the ones who are supposedly embracing and open and understanding of people, whereas the conservative and orthodox are the narrow-minded ones.
Right, right. Aaron?
Well, I would agree with Barak on that and just say that, take for example, gay marriage. There's no respect on the left for the feelings and values and beliefs of religious people. For instance, I just saw a Christian woman who's being just persecuted like an inquisition by the government because she refused to perform. She didn't want to have, she owns a floral shop, and she, because of her Christian values and beliefs, she didn't want to be the one to provide the flowers for a gay marriage. And she's just being raked over the coals. Well, why isn't there a respect for that value and belief, which comes out of her Bible, the New Testament, or let's say an Orthodox Jew, for that instance. So yeah, there's an intolerance for anyone who has a differing viewpoint.
And yet they're very tolerant.
Right.
Ari, on that?
Well, the best way in modern America, or the modern Western civilization, to identify a bigot is to find someone who says they're tolerant and open to diversity. It is almost the marker. It is the dog whistle of bigotry. Because as soon as you say that, as soon as they say that, we who are non-leftists immediately know from our experience that they don't mean diversity or tolerance of us. They mean tolerance of only those who fall into lockstep with the standard leftist boilerplate agenda items, and the Reformed Jews within that movement, whether they're true believers, the clergy, the rabbis of it, or even the congregants who are lulled into this, exhibit this type of bigotry towards anyone who doesn't fully agree with them on every one of their issues.
Okay, gentlemen, if a person said right now, look, in terms of Reform Judaism, stop worrying about it. Barak, let's begin with you. I worry about it because?
About Reform Judaism, if Reform Judaism and the push that it has is such that it actually takes us away from God altogether, which is some people might call irony. The whole point is that we should be closer to God, and this is actually making people think that they are getting closer to God while pushing them away from God. That's why it's dangerous. And to use Ari's analogy, it's a violation of the commandment that says, you shall not carry God's name in vain. And perhaps that's what we're guilty of when we embrace Reform Judaism as a legitimate form or stream, as they call it, of Judaism.
Just a sec, not to keep harming on it, but earlier we got into intentions and disobedience and stuff, and you were stressing more maybe a little bit of unintentional, maybe naivete or misdirection.
Right.
But let me ask you this. Surely, with this kind of harm that can be done, surely among certain elements, there is malicious bad intent.
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And the malicious bad intent is that they want to infuse what is liberal ideology and dangerous liberal ideology and give it a veneer of religiosity so that it can cleanse the ideology and make it even holy.
Aaron?
Well, for me, the Reform movement, the danger of it is I think it leads Jews away from Judaism rather than to Judaism. It's like, to me, I've always thought of it as the last stop. You know, it's like the place where Jews go to disappear and vanish forever, just disperse into the general populace. I mean, you see that nowhere better than in Hollywood, where Hollywood Jews are constant. You know, they just kind of drift off. They lose their Jewish identity. And that, to me, is the greatest danger. I mean, all through Jewish history, we've had many false messianic movements, you know, most famously someone like Shabbatai Tzvi, who led followers in desperate times. And he ended up leading them into, many of his followers into converting to Islam. So, there's a danger with these type of movements that offer false values that claim to be Jewish, which are not Jewish. And so many of their adherents follow values that, like Barak was saying, they believe them to be holy, that they're Jewish values. But when in fact, if they were to go to the source, they would discover that in fact, as Ari said, they're antithetical to Jewish values and ethics.
And Ari, David, worries about it because?
Because I look at the greatest threat to the Jewish people today is the same threat Jews have faced throughout all of history, extermination. And what protects us, the bulwark that protects Judaism and the Jewish people, and also I believe protects America, which is a Judeo-Christian country, is the existence of the State of Israel. And when you have a robust movement of Jews, the Reform movement, who are becoming more and more anti-Israel, and by proxy more and more, if you will, anti-Semitic with the bigotries I spoke about a moment ago, you now have a huge portion of Jews who are not only not defending themselves, but they're acting in ways that are providing or provoking danger to the rest of us. So it's the danger to Israel and Judaism as a whole that they present.
That's a great point, because I just want to add that they're comfortably aligned with the enemies of Israel and the Jewish people often.
Exactly.
Okay, so you gentlemen, we've come to my next question very conveniently. And so, yes, this is a complex matter. We discussed last week even what is a Jew. So let me ask this. Is a Jew if he washes his hands of allegiance to Israel and he sides with the enemies of Israel? Barak?
Wow, that's a tough one.
I mean, ethnically, you don't stop being who you are because it's a
Right.
tribe and it's in your blood, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit like saying an American who fights for ISIS.
Right.
Is he still an American?
He's still an American.
So I would say yes, he still is a Jew,
Right.
because it's not just the belief in God. There's
Right.
that component, of course. I think that the answer is, in my mind, if a Jew fights against Israel, he's no longer a Jew in my eyes. I don't respect him as a Jew. But whether he's a Jew in God's eyes, I can't answer that.
So a Jew that washes his hands of Israel, has no allegiance to Israel, maybe even supports, the Palestinian Authority or Hamas, he's not a Jew in your eyes.
That's right.
What is he? You're not sure? Okay, Ari, 1 second. Ari?
Well, he's clearly nothing.
Yeah.
But he's not a Jew.
No. David Horowitz had a great term for the West LA liberal Jews who supported all of these ideas that are destructive to America and Israel. He called them deracinated. In other words, they have expunged their own Jewish identity. They've left their own race. And I believe, Horowitz makes a profound point here, that's exactly what they've done. They've turned their backs so on their heritage in a malicious way that is, it would be one thing, okay, if they just, like I said earlier about the Jew who's uninvolved with Jewish life, but says, hey, I'm Jewish, I celebrate Hanukkah when I give gifts instead of Christmas. Okay, whatever. But that person has basically taken a non-involved position, not a destructive position. But Judaism is so fragile, both in its numbers and trying to appeal to the next generation, always has been such a fragile thing that it's really harmful when a Jew turns his back on those things and becomes destructive to it.
We hesitate to use the word traitor.
But he loses his
Traitor.
Jewish...
Yeah.
Traitor,
Okay,
I did.
okay, 1 second. So Aaron?
No, it's what I coined the term zombie Jew, because as a zombie is human, but it's been robbed of its soul, and it turns on humans for feeding. And to me, that's what the zombie Jew is, the one who has embraced all the Palestinian narrative. The left loves that word, narrative, which to me is a fiction, really, and most narratives are fictional. And they turn on their fellow Jews in the most rabid way. It's almost like a feeding frenzy. I mean, like J Street. They hate us. They hate us. They would kill us if they had the opportunity.
All the while thinking that what they're doing is Jewish. That's what that bothers me the most.
What's Jewish about it?
There's nothing Jewish about it.
What do they think is Jewish?
They think that, like the J Street crowd that you just referred to, they think that they are doing a Jewish thing because by attacking Israel and by making sure that Israel gives land as much as possible and ceding whatever it can to the Palestinians or the Arabs, that they're somehow strengthening Israel. This is their distorted view and their logic behind it. And that is truly dangerous. In your example, you were talking about the Jew who turns against Israel. But those are very few who are actually actively against Israel. Most of the Jews that we're talking about, the zombie Jews that Aaron's talking about, are the kind of Jews that don't even realize they're doing the enemy's bidding. Those are the people who've self-deluded themselves that concern me the most.
Well, they're afraid of confrontation. They're afraid of being called names.
They're not afraid of confrontation with other Jews.
Oh, no. Right. They're afraid of confrontation with the leftist culture.
Yes.
That rules. We're running out of time. Gentlemen, let's touch on, is there such a thing as anti-Semitic Jews? Is it?
Absolutely.
And what is this phenomenon?
It's the
Self-hate?
it goes with what I talked about a moment ago about turning on Israel and being destructive to Judaism as well, but also being completely repulsed and feeling complete shame for their own ethnic and religious identity, hating it so much. So often these people join other religions or other quasi-religious movements to fill the vacuum left in their lives by their exit from Judaism. You know, yoga, Zen, Buddhism, all that kind of stuff. The old joke about the Jewish mother looking for her son and she finds him in India on the ashram, or talking to the spiritual leader of a different ideology.
Sheldon, come
Aaron?
home.
Right. That's it. That's the punchline from that.
Aaron, a thought, or that's your thought?
My thought. I agree with Ari about all of that.
Okay. Barak?
Surely there are anti-Semitic Jews, and they are the worst kind of anti-Semites. They're the most dangerous kinds. They're the ones
Are
that...
they Jews?
No, in the same sense that we talked about the other Jews who are anti-Israel, who disassociate themselves from Israel. We treat them almost as traitors.
Okay.
We want to disassociate from them as well and assert that we reject them. They are not part of who we are. And what concerns me about anti-Semitic Jews, those who usually don't know anything about Judaism,
Okay.
they get grasped onto by the enemies of Israel.
Gentlemen, we have run out of time. We have a little bit of, we've got about 2 minutes left. Please, very briefly, this is how we will end. There's a Jewish individual who has decided to become religious. He or she hasn't been very religious, and they want to start getting more religious. They've talked to a few Jews. They happen to be Reform Jews. The Reform Jews said, come with us, we're going to a Reform synagogue. But on the way, they run into each of you, and you have a minute to say something to them. Look into the camera. What would you say to the Jewish individual on his way to a Reform synagogue?
Those people who you are hanging out with are lying to you, and girls won't like you if you're seen with them. No, seriously, it comes right down to most political arguments. Check your history, read the scripture, read the real texts, learn about what the Ten Commandments actually says and means, because you don't have to go to any synagogue if you know the Ten Commandments. That's the bottom line on it.
Thank you. Aaron?
I would say don't do it. Don't go with them. Because you're being misled, you're being taken into...
Just say no.
Right, just say no. You're being taken into an institution that is going to teach you false Jewish values that are antithetical to everything that Judaism stands for and believes. And I would say go back to the source. Read the Torah, read the Bible, read things about the Torah and the Bible, and learn for yourself what the real Jewish ethic and values are. And don't be misled by Reform Judaism that's going to lead you astray.
Aaron, is it better to be a wandering Jew than a Reformed Jew?
Oh, it's definitely better to be wandering, because as a wandering Jew, I'm always questioning and looking for truth.
Okay.
And you might stumble in the right place occasionally.
Right.
And the right place is a conversation with Barak Lurie, who's going to finish
I was going to
the
say
show.
the Glazov gang.
You know what? I like the way you
That's
think.
right.
Barak, you ended the show on such a profound note last week. I have a feeling this is going to be quite a closure.
I appreciate that. I don't know about that, but I'll tell you this. I would say to those Jews, you think that you are going to be actively involved as a Jew, but know this, you're not doing anything for Judaism or for yourself. Judaism involves a lot more hard work than this. They're making you think that you'll be a Jew by offering you to do the least amount possible. Don't be fooled. It's like having a one-night stand and thinking that you're in a relationship. Thank you.
Okay, all right.
Well done.
Okay.
Dang.
Yeah, wow, okay.
Pulled that one out.
Okay, Aaron Shuster, Barak Lurie, Ari David, what an honor and privilege it is to have you on the show and to discuss these very profound and meaningful issues and themes. Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Jamie.
you.
Thank you so much.
Jamie.
Yes.
Thank you. We'll see you next week on the Glazov Game. Good night.